and welcome to another episode of the Game Design Podcast. Once again, my name is Brad Carney, and I'm the founder of Final Boss Entertainment, and this week we're going to continue our series on Wrack, a game we developed and celebrated its 1-year anniversary last week. Now, I'm not going to rehash the entire intro from last week, but to sum it up, we're basically talking to some of the other developers of Wrack to kind of take a look back at what we did with the game and talk about what worked and what didn't. So, last week we talked with Remco Ernst, who is our lead artist, and as you might imagine, we mostly discussed the art side of Wrack. But this week we're going to talk to Hani Makron, who is the very first guest on this podcast, and we're going to talk about more of the design side of Wrack. Anyway, it's a long conversation and a good one, so I'm going to keep this intro brief, and I will be back at the end to wrap things up. So last time I was talking with Rulero about basically kind of like the whole like art side of Wrack, and I wanted to talk to you about kind of like more the whole game design side of Wrack, given that it is the game design podcast at all. But yeah, I kind of wanted to have a conversation about some of the things that we did in Wrack that we tried to pull off. Some of it worked, some of it didn't. But I wanted to kind of get your kind of thoughts on things. Having worked on the game and all that. So first, thanks for being on. And second, why don't you tell the people out there kind of like what you did for Wrack?
Me, I was mainly the 3D modeler of a lot of the monsters and weapons, and I dabbled in a little bit of animation at first, but then we got someone a lot better at it later on. Yeah, as well as like a lot of concept for, stuff that was outside of the human characters.
Yeah, it's like you did, I think all of the boss designs.
I think outside of Jagordo.
Yeah, right, yeah. Yeah, because he was more of like a character, so kind of ended up having our character artist / designer do him. But yeah, it's everything that was like basically just kind of like a regular monster in the game. You were responsible for.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, including I thought the first boss in the game, Geyser. I thought he was a fairly, I guess a cute, maybe iconic kind of figure. He's one a lot of people seem to like. Maybe just kind of because he was first and easy and didn't overwhelm people. They kind of warmed up to him.
Oh yeah, it was all a matter of kind of zeroing in on what type of design I should do for a lot of the monsters, because I think at first a lot of the rejected concepts were like really abstract looking and off the wall.
I think a lot of them were kind of Geiger inspired.
Oh yeah, that was definitely what was on my mind at the time, because I think a lot of the early alpha stuff we were using to kind of as placeholder for the game just reminded me a lot of like Quake, like 1, with a lot of the Cthulhu inspired like H.P. Lovecraft type stuff going on, and it was I was thinking 9 Inch Nails like music. That was generally the theme I was getting, so I guess that kind of rubbed off.
Yeah, and when we were first kind of starting the game off, we were kind of trying to make like a new Quake, a new Doom 2. It wasn't kind of till later that we kind of decided to go in a little bit different of a direction. Definitely like those kind of early monsters were definitely kind of in that kind of Doom Quake kind of vein. And then kind of like some of the later stuff. It definitely kind of started to have like its own kind of Wrack personality. Like maybe a little colorful, a little brighter, a little more cutesy, a little more adorable.
I think it was after the introduction of cell shading back in, I think it was early mid 2009.
Right.
That we did, and I feel like that kind of completely changed the tone of like what we were trying to get at, and that probably influenced a lot of the later design.
Yeah, definitely. Because I mean, like in the very early builds of the game, it's like we were using, kind of like a lot of like Unreal Tournament textures, as like
Oh
kind of
yeah.
placeholders and all that. But then it was like when we started to get like our own models in the game and kind of started to get the cell shading going. It was like, yeah, this is completely different. This is a lot more interesting. This is definitely the direction the game should go.
Oh yeah.
Uh,
It definitely molded like what we thought the game should be from then on.
Do you think it was a mistake then to not kind of go back and redo some of the earlier stuff that was done when kind of the vision of the game was different?
Well, I feel like everything we did after that point, we kind of scrapped everything we had at the time, anyways, and we kind of like went with new resources in general.
Right,
Because I guess, yeah, before that, if you remember the really, really old concept I did for the Arcturan, like at
right,
first it was just this really weird,
right.
faceless.
I'm pretty sure that's still in the game too. Is the in the gallery? Like
Oh, really?
I think I included that in there. Yeah. Not that anyone checked out the gallery at all, but
Yeah, I was like something with like two arms that come out of its elbows in opposite directions, and it's like this really horrific
just like
abomination.
very intricate
Uh,
helmets and
and
all
it
that.
was just it was too much for me at the time. I guess I represent that, and it didn't end up, and it didn't mesh with the aesthetic that we would have later gone on to. So
Right, yeah, and I do think you're right. I mean, the stuff that we did keep around, like the crawlers. I mean, it seemed to work fine. In the kind of
oh
new
yeah, the
art style
crawler.
we developed.
Because I guess the crawlers were really they were actually really simple compared to like some of the more weird designs at the time, which were really organic and
Like the sentries with their like long tails and
yeah, it was yeah,
like
especially
they were
that yeah.
scorpions or something.
Yeah, because I guess since we went with the cel shaded art style, and I guess everything we were going for more of like a cleaner, simpler design that catches the eye a lot quicker rather than something that's like overly detailed and with all these little intricate nubs and stuff everywhere.
Yeah, that does kind of remind me of what we were trying to go with like a this kind of whole kind of arcadey kind of look to the game. It's like
Yeah,
bright, colorful, catching your eye, but also like the gameplay. Like we were trying to go for like a very kind of fast and fun, furious kind of game. Something
yeah,
that didn't take itself too seriously, and something like it's funny. I kind of look out, in the landscape of gaming, and it seems like there's people are very there's a lot of very competitive people out there. People kind of like pride themselves on being good at stuff and doing well. There's people who are completionists, and a lot of people enjoy leaderboards and that kind of thing. And I kind of thought to myself like, what better way to like actually measure like how good someone is at something than score, which is something that's kind of fallen out of favor in recent years. But it's kind of boiling everything down to like an exact number. And I don't know. I mean, why do you think like
yeah.
that didn't really seem to resonate with people? And like, why do you think like score has kind of fallen out of favor, just kind of in general in the gaming landscape today?
Well, I guess nowadays everyone wants something to be around for a very strict reason. You can't get
That's
away
true.
with like yeah stuff in, for example, like in 1997 when you had GoldenEye come out and levels were designed like without the intention for being completely straight linear levels. So you had like tons of rooms that served absolutely no purpose other than to represent a place that actually exists.
Right.
Stuff like that wouldn't really fly nowadays. And I guess while score does serve more of a purpose than a completely useless room, uh, I guess people want it to be a little more tied to the actual gameplay and to give more of a purpose
Right.
to
Yeah.
to like work towards like something that would affect the gameplay rather than just be kind of like a outlying element.
That is a piece of feedback that I got fairly consistently. You know, it's like a when we would take the game to conventions and stuff like SGC and QuakeCon. Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, one question I got a lot was like, "Hey, so like, what can you like? Do the points like? Can you buy stuff with it?" And I was like, "No, it's just kind of like to. I mean, you get extra lives from it, which didn't seem to satisfy anybody. But you know, it's. I mean, it was just kind of like there, like to kind of show like how well you're doing, and for like the sake of competition, most people were kind of that wasn't enough for them. They were kind of looking for more from that. And, that's part of why this next game we're doing. The score. Let's just say you actually will be able to do stuff with it. So we're kind of taking one of the elements of Wrack that wasn't quite fleshed out enough, and kind of. We're trying to do more with it this time, trying to incorporate it more into the core gameplay. And yeah, that actually does remind me of something that I think is fairly interesting. Rack was in development for just a really long time. Like, I mean, we spent like 6 years on it, and because
Yeah.
of that amount of time, like it's I mean, just surely because of the amount of time we spent on it. We would as the development went on, we would have new ideas for it. We'd kind of try and take it in different directions as it went along, and as a result, like the game wasn't built from the ground up with all these ideas in mind. So we kind of had a bit of a Duke Nukem 4,
Oh
A
yeah.
Duke Forever, kind of phenomenon with it, where it's
There
like
was some serious cyclic development going on there. It just kept going and
with that
going.
game, yeah, and to some extent with ours, but
Oh yeah.
I think like a prime example of that was so like kind of like really towards the end, we were really worried that like the game was going to be seen too much as just like a regular Doom clone and like not interesting enough to people. So it wasn't going to be perceived as kind of different and unique and all that. So we were really trying to address that. So kind of one of the things that we did in the last few months before it came out was the introduction of finishers. So like I mean, one of the things that kind of sets Rack apart is that it's because it's like an arcade game and like it's kind of inspired in part by like fighting games, like your Street Fighters and that kind of thing. We wanted the the whole like killing one monster after another here it's
Yeah.
like we wanted there to be like a bigger payoff for that, so it meant more than just like adding your score, which nobody cared about.
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
but so we try to like make it like okay, well the first idea that we had, and by we I mean me and our lead animator Max, who was from France. I don't know why I threw that detail in there, but anyway.
It's
uh,
necessary.
but no, we were talking about like okay, so like what if while your chain was like above like 8 or something, every time you swing with the hyper blade, like your melee weapon, which is something I want to discuss a little bit a little later. But how about when your chain is like above 8, like every time you swing with that, like it does like 2 swings. And then it's like if it's above like 15, it does 3. So like basically, there's like a heavy incentive to kind of keep your chain going so that your weapons
Yeah,
do more
like
damage.
streaks. Yeah, that reminds me of like what do you call it? The Arkham games, the Batman Arkham games. Like if you have like an unbroken streak of like 20 hits or higher, you get increasingly better like these finishing moves that are like really really cool, and I feel like it adds a lot to like just make you want to get better at it rather than just like pick enemies off like one by one.
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah, and I mean that's what we ended up doing. So instead of like the whole like while your streak is high, you get extra slashes with your sword. What actually ended up happening is like he didn't want to like animate that because it was just going to be like really clunky, and it wasn't going to be an elegant thing, and like it was only going to matter for your sword. Like the other weapons weren't going to get anything out of it. So eventually, what we decided was like, yeah, kind of, I guess what's in the Arkham games, like having some kind of like finisher. Um, and we tried that, and it seems like kind of outside of any score runs, it's basically ignored completely. So we ended up putting like all this work like into this mechanic that I think because it wasn't like the game wasn't envisioned with this kind of like from the get go. Like the implementation of it was kind of clunky, and I mean, for one, it was too hard to it was too hard to like get a long enough streak to really get like a powerful finisher off. And like
Yeah.
second, like it was just like because of the way the levels were designed and everything, it was so hard to like get like a situation where like you get a nice long kill chain and then have like a good opportunity to like unleash a finisher. Like the levels just like weren't designed with that in mind. So
Oh yeah,
like
that was pretty much
to
like
really take advantage of that, it's like we were gonna have to like go back and like redo the levels and like make sure there's enough enough weak enemies, enough fodder out there for you to get a good chain going, and
yeah.
then kind of have a good opportunity to unleash a finisher. Um, or it was going to take like major changes to kind of how it worked. And, just like trying to like kind of shoehorn that in with like a couple months to go. I mean, it just
Yeah.
wasn't good. I mean, I think like literally like the finisher for the Hyperblade like came in like the day after the game came out or like right
Oh,
before it did, something like that. So it was like, I
I
mean,
think
just
it's
you just didn't have enough time to tweak it and get it right.
yeah. I guess it's just the way that the game was developed, like over time. Like instead of being all built up of like a single, I guess fixed vision. It was more. I feel like it was more like agile type development
Right.
where we kind of like built it like as we went, and we played that version. And it was like, oh, let's add this or whatever. And
Right.
I guess the problem with that was it wasn't as cohesive as it could have been just because of the nature of how it was made.
Right. Yeah, and the fact that we were such a small team, I mean, that did give us that agility, but at the same time, we were kind of pretty close to biting off more than we could chew, especially at the end when it was like, oh my god, we need to make these changes. It's, people aren't
Oh
responding
yeah,
to the game how we want them to be. We gotta do something about that.
yeah. Because I mean, it seemed like we had a lot of elements that were uh, they weren't like they didn't seem like cohesively like built in like
Right.
that together. It felt
Right.
like we made this part, and then it's like, oh, we made this part like a lot later, and
Right.
like try to change the previous parts to kind of like match up with it.
Yeah, and I do think that was like the big problem that we had kind of with how this game was perceived, because I mean, we built this game at least towards the end of it. The emphasis was like very heavily on kind of platformer game elements. Kind of like the arcade elements. Like we were focusing heavily on kind of like the bosses and like the individual mechanics on the different levels and the it's like me personally. I was focusing a lot on like making the game entertaining for score runs and that kind of thing. But I mean that was all coming much later. Kind of, and this was being laid on top of the foundation that we laid for the game, which was basically kind of like a classic shooter. Kind of like a Doom Quake style shooter. So
Mhm.
it was kind of like even though we had all of these other things we were trying to do with the game, kind of like the core at its core, it was still kind of like this Doom style shooter, and that's what people really perceived about the game, like right off the bat. So it was kind of like all the effort we were trying to put into these other games, or these other elements to make it a more unique and distinct game. It was really kind of being ignored completely by the
Yeah,
audience.
I felt like it felt kind of like while we were making a very like Doom like game, we were kind of forcing it not to be,
Right.
even though it in essence it was very close.
And I think had we started the game with like, okay, we want to make this kind of game that's kind of a fusion of these sorts of elements, I do think it would have I do think it would have been perceived as something better and more interesting, and not as like this kind of kind of Doom clone with all these other with them trying to shoehorn all these
Oh
other
yeah,
elements into it.
it seemed like it had like a completely different objective. Like in the beginning, like how it was meant to be uh, multiplayer co-op.
Yeah. And
it's
again,
like,
I mean, I think a lot of that comes from having a having a game that takes 6 years to make.
yeah,
It's just naturally going to evolve and change over that time. And
yeah, that's very true. Yeah,
yeah,
I guess it was just like from the beginning, it wasn't as um, developed, I guess, as like as an idea
right.
as it, I guess should have been for a more, you know, to avoid having to work on it for like 6 years.
Yeah, and I mean that's why with this new game, I'm being very careful to make sure that what it is and what we're trying to do with it, what we're going for. It's all very clearly planned out from the beginning. And I also am trying to get it done in a reasonable time frame, so we don't kind of veer off into other directions and you know,
Mm-hmm.
try to add on things that aren't organically part of the idea and its development. We don't want to be trying to force anything into it that doesn't really belong and didn't belong from the beginning.
Yeah, it would feel forced and not.
Right.
I guess it wouldn't naturally flow. I guess.
Yeah, but I mean, thankfully, a lot of these elements that are in this new game are from Wrack, and they are far more fleshed out and much more organic and work out much better for the game. Specifically, it's like chains. They're going to be much better around. Score is going to be much more relevant this time. You're actually going to be able to do stuff with it, and the finishers, like they're the way they work in this game. It's much better. It's much more intuitive. You'll actually get to hold on to them for a lot longer and use them at a time where you choose instead of like I got a chain of 20 and my timer's running and I got to use it now. So hopefully
Yeah.
none of that is happening.
Oh yeah, I feel like that would work a lot better because I guess one of the issues in Rack was like you clear a room full of enemies, you have like super chain like charged up, and there's like nothing but grunts everywhere,
Pretty much, yeah.
and it just feels like a waste.
So, I mean, one of the things that we tried to do really hard in Rack was, we wanted each weapon to be balanced. Like that was like a big point of focus for us. It's like even we tried to make the melee weapon like just really powerful and not only that, but like useful. Like have there be like specific situations where like it was actually useful. So it's like while there were only 5 weapons in the game, and we had planned on 8, but we ended up stopping
Yeah.
development earlier than we wanted to. But it's like every one of those weapons had like a distinct role, and like even the melee weapon. Whereas like in a lot of other shooters, it's like kind of like once you get like a certain weapon, like it'll just completely outclass like a previous one. So it's like once you have that, it's like there's no point in using the other ones anymore. And I kind of feel like one of the big things that's great about a classic shooter is that you get to keep all your weapons and actually use them when you see fit. And I do
Oh
think
yeah.
that makes the gameplay a lot more interesting, just because like you have like more options to approach a situation with instead of like, well, I found this one weapon, on this guy back there. I guess I have to use it. Everything else is out of ammo. So, but like, I mean, how do you think that worked out? Do you think that worked out well? Do you think we kind of whiffed in some areas, or
Well, I don't know.
was the shotgun
Pistol.
OP?
No, well, I think
Maybe.
it maybe was, but I don't think there's too much of a problem with it. We're not,
Yeah.
it wasn't like a multiplayer game where you have to,
Right.
sink your teeth like into like serious balance.
Right. But I
But
mean, the shotgun was also designed to be kind of like your go-to standard weapon.
oh yeah, that's your support right there.
Yeah, it's like
But,
everything else was like kind of like situational.
yeah, especially like the pistol, where it served as a kind of a weak sniper or just a starting weapon.
Right.
For the most part, it just followed like a lot of the standards that were set by like early first-person shooters, like just early on, just as the type of weapons that there were. It wasn't anything like totally unconventional or off the wall.
Well,
Um,
see, I don't know about that because like the way I tried to approach the weapon design, it was like okay, so like the hyperblade, it was supposed to be like an anti like up close like anti melee monsters weapon. So like it was
uh,
great against like the crawlers and the crushers and everything.
yeah,
The pistol was supposed to be good against far away single enemies. So like if there were like little monsters like on a ledge like across the room from you, like
yeah,
the pistol was perfect for that. And like in the first level, like where you first pick up the pistol, like it's setting up like that exact situation. It's like there's a little like when you first pick up the pistol, there's like a little like gap or a little like kind of hole in the floor in front of you, and there's like monsters on the ledge across there, and it's like you had started with a hyperblade, like that's like not the weapon you want to use there because like you can't really get close to those
yeah.
monsters very easily. So it's like that's kind of showing you like okay, like the pistol is like the perfect weapon to use here. And then the shotgun is kind of like for multiple like up close enemies. So if you're kind of like in mid range and fighting against a few monsters at once, like the shotgun's great for that. The pulsar and like this is kind of like where things kind of deviate. I think at least I intended them to.
Yeah,
Um, but it's supposed to be like an anti
like
like
crowd
a
control.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. So and it's for like up close enemies. So like the first time you pick this up, it's level 2, and like the second you pick it up, like monsters like all start spawning in around you. So I mean you could use like the hyperblade, but it's not going to kill stuff as fast. The same goes for the shotgun. So
Yeah.
like that's where like the pulsar is like really great. It's kind of like an anti get off me kind of like short
Yeah.
range weapon. And by the way, like that's why the missiles on it they arc. They have gravity.
Yeah,
Um,
I like that way better. Like than if they were ridiculously overpowered. Kind
right.
of like how Doom is. He just goes in a straight line and
Yeah.
just
Right.
destroys everything.
Yeah. If they didn't drop, like it'd be great at long range too. And then at that point, it's just like whoa. Well, why use anything else
Yeah,
ever? Like
everything
just
else is obsolete at that point.
yeah.
Well,
Right.
unless you consider the
Ammo.
well, there's the ammo and the speed of the projectiles. I guess it's not hit scan.
Right. Well, I mean, those the pulsar projectiles though they go pretty fast. Like, I
Yeah,
mean, most of the enemies are pretty slow in Wrack, so
yeah, that's true. It'd be like how in if you're considering like Quake 3, like plasma, each like shot of the plasma rifle, like or the plasma gun,
may
it's
as
like
well be
20,
hit scan.
yeah, 20 damage, but I mean everyone who uses it has like 10% accuracy, but
Right.
that's because of the speed of everyone.
Right.
Uh, with
And
slower
also, I
mouse,
think the
like I
hitboxes
guess it'd
on
be
the
like,
what's that?
oh no, it's just it would be so easy to hit monsters with it though, like
Yeah.
in the rack because of the relative to you, they're just might as well be
Right.
standing still.
Yeah, pretty much. And then finally, like the bazooka. Well, not finally. I didn't really mention the. Actually, I did mention the hyperblade. Yeah. So, and then finally the bazooka. Like it's supposed to be kind of like a. It's basically like the long range shotgun. So like the shotgun is great for like a cluster of nearby
Yeah,
enemies. Like the bazooka is supposed to be for like a cluster of far away
it's
enemies.
it's basically the BFG. It's basically the
Sort
BFG,
of.
I guess.
It's similar. I mean, like the BFG is good up close though too. Like it's actually better up close, whereas like the bazooka, you do not want to use that up
Yeah,
close
it's
unless
yeah.
you have the blast guard.
Well,
So
yeah, that's true. It's just I guess the closest to the BFG, like because just taking out like large clusters of enemies and
right, yeah,
stuff, and
yeah,
having the splash damage, and
right,
not just like single target.
right.
Uh, I think no, that's not right. Yeah, I was gonna say it. I think it's the only uh, weapon that's not single target, but no, that's not right considering like everything else
Yeah,
with
I mean the
multiple
shotgun's
projectiles. Yeah,
multi-target, the hyperblade's multi-target.
yeah. But I guess like a range type like attack like with splash damage and stuff is good.
Right.
Um,
But yeah, it's I mean all these weapons like there's an exact situation where like it's absolutely the best weapon to use, and it's like every time we introduce a weapon, You're basically put in like, hey, this is the perfect situation to use it. The hyperblade I didn't touch on, but like when you start the game, like that's the first weapon you have, and the first thing you do is like you go out in this little hallway, and the only way to progress through that hallway is to slash these two little crawlers that are in front of you, and so it's, I mean, that's kind of showing you that like, hey, this is like the perfect situation to use this weapon. It's great against these little melee monsters. When you swing it, it's gonna hit multiple things in front of you, and also it's damn powerful.
Yeah, there were really good situations where like weapons like that were used. I feel like it could have been more like with some weapons. I guess like the pistol, you're probably not going to be using it as much as anything else in the game.
Yeah,
Uh,
and I mean, I guess you could increase the damage on it. I don't know.
I was thinking like the speed, just like a really fast pistol. Um,
Yeah.
but
But hey, that
uh,
was going to interfere with another weapon we were going to have later. But anyway.
yeah, exactly. It's just it's stuff like that. If you introduce like a new element and you don't go back and revise everything, then it suddenly feels odd.
Yeah. I mean, if you introduce something new, it can easily like step on the toes of everything you've had up to that point. So
Yeah, exactly.
it can definitely make things tricky. I did have that in mind when I was designing all 8 weapons. I was making sure like, hey, so everything past the bazooka, that's not interfering with anything, right? And I don't think it would have. So it's, I mean, one in particular, it's like there was like a very specific situation where it's like, hey, this weapon is absolutely the best. By the way,
Yeah,
it was going to be a hallway, so anyway,
yeah,
I don't suppose that gives away what it was going to be. Anyway, but yeah, it's. I mean, this kind of all goes in line with what we talked about in the balance episode of this podcast. It's like you kind of achieve balance not by like kind of have everything be the same in terms of power. You just kind of want everything to have like a role, and like for there to be something that fills that role, like something that's like the best like in that specific situation. And I think for the most part we pulled that off. But yeah, I mean maybe the pistol
it yeah
was a little
it
bit weak.
yeah. Other than the pistol, I guess it felt pretty good. I guess for a lot of the weapons.
And it's funny, it's like even if you even if you get things right, like in your Excel spreadsheet, and like you design the game, so it's like, yeah, this one weapon, this is gonna be best here, this is gonna be best here, blah blah blah. It's like then a lot of people would just be like, oh, this weapon's awesome, and like just use that like the whole time.
Oh yeah,
It's like
because
I did see it a lot, with the hyperblade. It's like there were a lot of people who just like go ham, just run around and just swing and just blow
oh,
things up with it
it's just
constantly.
it's so effective because you might as well be a projectile. You're like the player themselves with
Oh
that,
yeah,
even though it's a melee weapon, because of the
yeah,
speed of the game.
yeah. And it's fun, but I mean, you're just gonna die really fast doing that,
Hey, it's
unfortunately.
nice, giving options, not allowing a single type of way to play.
Right, yeah, and I do think that's a big part of the weapons being balanced. It's like
Yeah.
and also keeping all your weapons, like you're giving the player a lot of different options to
Oh yeah.
approach a situation with. And by the way, like even though like one weapon might be optimal in a certain situation, there might be other options which are also viable. And like depending
Oh yeah.
on the situation, it's like maybe the other weapon's out of ammo. Maybe you feel better with this one particular weapon. It's like you have options. Like we don't
Yeah.
want it to be. I think when you're trying to balance something and like kind of give things a role, like it's very easy to fall into like a trap of like, hey, this is the only weapon that can damage this thing. Everything else is completely useless, and
And yeah, and you have no
it
ammo for
feels
that. So
artificial. It feels contrived, and
yeah, absolutely.
I'm glad that we didn't pull that off in a
Oh
in
yeah.
in this. One of the things that I did think was interesting to kind of balance, like the shotgun, is something we ended up putting late, which I think actually worked out, unlike some of the other things we put in late. But we changed the crushers, which are like these big orange robots. We gave them a counterattack, and it was based on. kind of like one of the conventions in this game is that like things that hit multiple times are like in a given frame, like the shotgun or something, it's more likely to cause a stun. But when it comes to those enemies, like hitting them multiple times in a frame is more likely to lead to a counterattack. So if you were trying to shoot them with something that like hit multiple times, in the same frame, basically the shotgun. At this point in the game, nothing else did that. But basically hitting them with that
Oh
was going to
yeah.
cause them to counterattack.
I
So
I really like that because it's just the more damage you give them, it's like the kind of the tougher they are. It
yeah,
reminds me of what do you call it? Oh man, the final boss in Panzer Dragoon Zwei. It's if you beat the final boss before like the timer runs out, you have to fight like a much harder version of it. But if and you get like a lot more score, I guess. But if you wait till the timer runs out and then kill the boss, it's like whatever, you won. Ooh,
right.
it's
But it's like we're
it's
not impressed with that.
yeah,
Get
it's
out of
it's
here.
kind of like yeah, it's like if you're good enough, you I guess you deserve a harder or like a more challenging, you know, situation or something.
Right. Yeah.
I like that, something like that though. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, and I tried to do that with with the whole like medal system and rack. It was like I really wanted people to go for like like okay, so like for those who don't know, it's like every time you beat a level, it tallies up your kills and your secrets and treasure and like the amount of time and the score you got on over the course of the level, and like it factors all that in, along with the difficulty level you played in. And, it gives you a medal based on that. It was like I was hoping people would try and really work towards really be completionists and really try and work towards getting the best medals they could on the levels. But unfortunately, I did not see a lot of that. Or it's like I don't know,
Yeah,
like maybe like in Panzer Dragoon, like a higher percentage of people tried to beat the final boss by the time the timer ran out. I don't know, like
there
part of
was like
this is
an
just like inexperience, so like I don't know what to expect. I don't know like what like what percentage of people tend to be completionists, what percentage of people really want to go challenge themselves. So I don't know,
yeah.
it's been tricky.
In the case of Panzer Dragoon, I guess it's far more like arcade oriented than Wrack because it's a very simple game.
Right.
I guess in the case of a final boss, it's all about your score and ranking and stuff. But throughout the rest of the game, based on you know stuff like your uh, I don't know, enemy kill percentage and stuff, and you know the speed at which you defeated bosses. It gives you points where it actually evolves your dragon into a much stronger form, and
Okay.
it rewards you for playing better, I guess. And
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, and I mean, kind of like I think kind of like the whole finisher mechanic in Wreck. It's like the better the better chain you can get, the more powerful of a finisher you
yeah,
can unleash. Although that's sounds a
yeah,
little better executed in a Panzer Dragoon, but
yeah, because it's permanent. It's not just like a
right,
single shot. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, I could see that. And yeah, I mean that. I do think that's a good way to kind of reinforce that like, hey, the game wants you to play better. It's like if you can give them like some kind of permanent boost for doing that.
Oh
Sounds like a
yeah,
good thing to me.
yeah, it definitely like I guess promotes you to promotes replay and just it try to avoid making mistakes and play better overall rather than just I'll get through it if I play like crap or if I play really well or something.
Right. Yeah. Or is the probably the finishers like just again just because of like how infrequently you could do them and just all that like the amount of reinforcement it provided for good play just wasn't enough. I don't think.
I thought it was I really like that mechanic actually. It seemed to add a lot to the gameplay rather than detract from it or anything. It
Well,
was
yeah, I certainly don't think it detracted, but
yeah. I mean, it could have. I guess it could have been done better, but it does. it was like a really cool idea.
Yeah. Yeah, it was definitely a cool idea. I mean, I was really psyched about it when we put it in, but
Oh yeah, I
it's just like trying to, kind of smash it in there, in the last month or two.
yeah,
I mean, that was a little tough.
yeah, definitely.
It's like, especially when like a few weeks out, it's like we didn't even have them all animated. It was it was a tricky thing. So I want to talk to you a little bit about the level design of Wrack because as we've kind of touched a little bit, one of the big things that we tried to do was like, we really wanted to kind of introduce people to different elements of the game, kind of in a very organic fashion. It's like, for instance, like every time like we introduce like a new weapon, like, or we're kind of trying to show you like the exact sort of situation, like basically we're putting you in a situation where like that exact weapon is optimal. So hopefully it's kind of leading you to to realize that like, hey, this right here, this is the kind of place where you want to be using this. So it's like when you get the pistol, like you're right in front of enemies that are far away from you, like just two or three, where the pistol is kind of optimal. When you get the shotgun, like waves of monsters are spawning in at you. So
Yeah,
that's kind of like a situation where like the shotgun's optimal. The pulsar, when you get like a ton of enemies spawn in, like you need to get
yeah,
them off of you fast. And then finally, like the bazooka, like when you get it, like there's ledges of like clusters of monsters that are kind of like away from you. So like if you just grab that weapon and shoot it, and everything goes boom, it just like
yeah.
explodes in a mist of blood. Like it's very reinforcing, and it's kind of showing you like, hey, this is where you want to use this.
Yeah, I thought that it was pretty good with that because it felt very clear, like what you were supposed to use in this situation, rather than, you know, just you can use anything here and kind of win.
Right. But
But
this one weapon we just gave you that I know you want to shoot for the first time.
yeah, I mean, it felt like really pretty refined, but that's probably because we scrapped it like 20 times each for like every level.
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
that happened a lot.
Oh yeah.
But
But
hey,
I mean,
we wanted to get things right, so
yeah,
we really went back.
I thought it ended up like pretty optimal, I guess, for for those purposes. Like
Yeah.
yeah,
But this whole idea of kind of like introducing elements throughout the levels, like it was more than just the weapons too. It was
Mhm.
like specifically the first level, like it's like right after you kill the monsters with the pistol, like you got to jump across that little gap to basically get to the switch on the other side.
yeah,
Basically, it's like trying to introduce to you that hey, there's switches in the game you got to press to do stuff. And then the second, like, hey, there's jumping in the game, and like you can jump really far, and you can run really fast, and jump really far. And like even the first room of the game, like it's specifically just like this kind of big empty room, like just so you can run around and kind of get your bearings and
yeah. It's a big like I guess it's a tutorial level without kind of rubbing it in as much as
right.
some really annoying examples.
If anyone is I say this like it's some obscure video that no one's seen, but if anyone has seen that sequelitis video that Ego Raptor did, like talking about Mega Man and Mega Man X, where like basically he was just kind of talking about how like Mega Man X, like the way it introduces all the elements to the game, like a very organic, non-handholdy way.
Yeah, yeah.
Basically,
That's
after I saw that, I was like, "Oh my god, he's completely right!" And like, I went and like totally redesigned like the first level of Rag, kind of like laid it out that way. And I was like, "Yeah, I mean, this is so much better this way. Like, this is this is going to introduce like everything we do in a much more organic way, and it's going to be a lot more fun. We're not going to be holding people's hands and then taking it to conventions. People were still really confused and everything, and
well, I mean, it's better than telling them straight like what to do and expecting them to get it on their first try. It's more, I guess. Well, not as much as like some of the older games like Mega Man or something, but it's, I guess, slightly more trial and error type thing
right.
where I guess you learn better through experience rather than it's like, oh, here's how you play the game. You do all this stuff. W to
Right.
walk forward like 100% of every other first-person shooter ever. Um, you don't have to explain stuff like that because
Right, right.
I don't understand why every game ever has a tutorial nowadays that tries to reiterate mechanics that pretty much everyone and their parents know nowadays, and they don't like cover stuff that's more specific to the game.
Yeah, but I think I think you're looking at it from the perspective of someone who who's not new to games.
Yeah, that's a thing. It seems like they're building these tutorials for people that are obviously not supposed to be accustomed to these mechanics, but like the rest of the game, they kind of like expect you to understand like a lot of these mechanics that have existed in like a lot of like first-person shooters. I don't know if I have any like good examples of that, but it just seems really weird. Like it's this weird split where they're trying to design it for people that are familiar but not familiar at the same time.
Right.
I don't know.
But yeah, I guess the point that I'm trying to drive at, and yeah, this goes for a lot of other elements in Wrack too. It was, I kind of like went and redesigned like this one part of it, thinking like, oh my god, this is gonna help out so much. People are really gonna like this and appreciate it. And it was like, yeah, I mean, I guess maybe a little, I mean, it seemed like, there were some people who, really grasped that, we were trying to introduce the elements to them, or they grasp that on like a subconscious level. It was like first it's like on this level, you have that part where you have to jump, and then like later on there's a part where you have to crouch to kind of progress through the level, and like
Yeah.
even that, it was like we had to like put ammo under there so people saw like, hey, there's stuff under there. I gotta
Yeah.
go under there. But then the mini boss that we introduced right after, like the way you dodge his two attacks are by crouching and jumping. So it's kind of trying to like reinforce all that. But it's like we did all that, and it's like. Yeah, I mean, it was effective for some people, but I mean, there was still like a lot of confusion out there. Basically, it didn't work out quite as well as I hoped, but I guess it was pretty good. And I just kind of wonder, like, because I went and like did all this redesigning and kind of reworking it. It was like, what's the return on that investment that we put into kind of going in and redoing these things? And the reason I say like this is true for like other parts of the game, it was like we at one point completely redid the levels so they were bigger and more open, and kind of had better architecture and all that. And it's like, I wonder what the payoff was there. We completely remodeled and retextured all the weapons, like between the beta and the full release. And like, I wonder if anyone noticed.
Yeah.
And that was a lot of work. That was not something we did over a weekend. That was that was a big deal.
I don't know. Maybe at conventions, it's probably not like the best way to gather like some sort of feedback like that, because I guess people are like a lot more pressed for time. It's like a little. They sit down for 5 minutes to evaluate this product rather than you're sitting down like and you have time to actually spend.
Right,
playing
but
this
I
game
mean,
over.
in the 5 minutes that people spend on, in those 5 minutes that people are spending with it, though, are is Rack having a bigger impact because we went and redesigned all these things? And I like to think yes, but as far as like trying to actually gauge feedback, I mean, I don't know. I hope so.
It's yeah.
I like to think that all the extra work we put in to really get things right paid off, but I don't know. I don't know. We'll see.
Yeah,
I guess we won't see. I guess we have no way of knowing. But
well, I mean, I guess hope for the best.
pretty
I
much.
don't know. Yeah.
Pretty much. I mean, you were talking a little bit about the conventions, and I mean, as I said on multiple occasions, I think one of the great things about going to these conventions is like just getting really solid feedback from people. Like you're getting like basically like the most raw and honest form of
Oh
feedback you
yeah,
can get.
yeah,
Because like if you're relying on someone to like write a review or like record footage and then upload it to
yeah.
YouTube, like
It's
there's a
like an
lot
instant
of
impression. Yeah.
right, but there's a lot of filtering going on there. Especially like in a review, it's like you're not watching them play. You're just kind of like getting their impression of it. But even something with like a YouTube video, it's like if people are having trouble with it, like they're probably not gonna want to embarrass themselves and upload the footage. And like plus like you're not getting to see their facial expressions, you're not getting to see their body language and all that.
Yeah.
So it's like just kind of like the best feedback you can get is just from really going to like these conventions.
Oh, that's actually true. Yeah, because you get to see the instead of trying to refine their stance on something. I guess it's just their immediate impression on something.
Right. Yeah, and I know that's something that like happens in like programming too. I think I've heard it referred to as like the hallway test. Where it's like someone's like walking down the hallway, just like, hey, you, come here, come test this out, and getting their feedback on it. But I just think that kind of thing is like so important, and I think. And I know you've been around for a lot of these conventions, but like some of the best feedback we've gotten has been from like going to these conventions and just kind of like watching people play it. Like I remember, I think it was SGC 2013. We were there with like one of the levels, and it was like the main one we were having people start on at the time, and at one point, like it was a level where like you could branch, like you could go left or you could go right, and a lot of people were going right, and I kind of had the shotgun like kind of off in a corner in this level, and like everybody missed it. Like not like maybe like one
Yeah.
person like the entire day it was like, hey, there's a shotgun there. I should go get that. So like basically like as a result of that, like I had to go put the shotgun on like a more in the center of the room and actually put treasure where the shotgun used to be. And, as a result, like everyone started picking
Oh
up the
yeah.
shotgun. I was like, oh, phew, thank God. Now these people are
Yeah.
having way more fun with this. But like that's not the kind of thing like I'd ever. It's like if I was just like going like based on like a review for like a feedback, like the review would be like, yeah, this game
Yeah.
sucks, no weapons anywhere, you know,
Yeah.
zero
Now
out of 10.
it's much nicer to be able to have access to some that type of like frequency testing rather than just a single opinion that's been developed by like just one individual that probably most people don't agree with or something.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but it's I mean. I just think it's very important to get that kind of like outside perspective because like if you're the developer like you're probably spending an insane amount of hours like just being immersed like in your game and it's like
Yeah.
it's
You
almost
kind
hard
of,
to understand like oh of course everyone's gonna know like to look here for the shotgun, why wouldn't they? I mean that's just common sense, but like your perspective of it is completely warped
oh
and
yeah,
it's
because you don't have like the what do you call it? I guess a lot of the implied design is just it makes sense to you, but if you present it to someone without like explaining anything to them, it's
right.
like doesn't make any sense. I guess
Yeah,
it's
but yeah, it's it's I mean I've heard the same kind of things from like people who write like mysteries. It's like they're never at a point where like they don't know exactly where everything is going.
yeah.
So it's like they never get to really know like, hey, so is this working? Like is do we make this like super obvious here?
Yeah.
And it's usually
Oh
like no,
yeah.
no.
Okay. I realized what it's like similar to. It's like I guess like with engineering, you have like a customer and then you have a contract and you have a set of requirements that you want to fulfill, but those requirements have to be as detailed as possible because if you miss something like that's implied to to be in there, but it's not actually specifically stated in there. There's no contractual requirement for you to add anything like that.
Right.
So I mean, you kind of want to be like you don't want to imply like anything at
Right.
all.
You want to be explicit.
Exactly.
Yeah. And yeah, I mean, I do think that's, probably a big reason. Like, I mean, we're talking earlier about, tutorials and not having them. That's probably a big reason why. One of many reasons, but I do think it's probably a reason why like tutorials are kind of coming more into favor, because it is trying to lay things out in an explicit manner, and trying to communicate things as clearly as possible. It's if you kind of like let people figure things out, it's a little more organic and everything, but I mean at the same time it's more vague. There's more room for confusion. There's more room for people like just straight up missing things. And
Yeah,
then they're not enjoying the game.
yeah. I feel like missing things is one thing, but I feel like trial and error is like a really good way, like to teach.
But it's hard. It's hard though in a more complex environment. It's like it's okay. Like trial and error works in like a 2D platformer where it's like you only have like four buttons and a D-pad, and you can only move in two directions. It's like you mash a few buttons, and before long you're gonna pretty much know what everything does. But in a 3D environment where like you have a keyboard with a million buttons, and a mouse and all this, and some things only work situationally. I mean, it could be pretty complicated. Like I think you're gonna have a lot of trouble, trying to find things out.
Yeah,
Uh,
it might depend on the player, I guess, because if you look at something like Dark Souls, the entire game, 100% of it is nothing but trial and error. There's just no handholding whatsoever. You kind of just figure everything out by dying a million times, and then just finding like the best way to do something, and it's slow refinement. I don't know if it would really apply to something like we were trying to make with Wrack,
right.
but
Yeah, it all depends on the game, and I don't think many games could get away with what Dark Souls is trying to, like what they're
yeah.
trying to do. I mean, for one, like Dark Souls is like perceived as like being difficult, so like people kind of have certain expectations going into it.
Oh yeah, it's not that it's difficult as in it's like unfair and it's just it's impossible or something. It's difficult as in you have to develop the skills to actually be able to play it uh, rather than being caught off guard or something.
Right.
It's but I don't know if it really
And by the way,
applies.
we were trying to do that with Wrack. It's for one, it is a game that is trying to reward skill. With like
Mhm.
the score system and the finishers and everything. But at the same time, it's like we wanted to make sure that like every death you had, it was fair.
Yeah,
Um,
it like it's fair and you know what you did wrong.
right.
So next time you're actually prepared for it and you kind of learn from your mistakes, and I feel like it's a really good way to.
Yeah, and by having lives and checkpoints, like every death is like fairly soft. Like it's not a huge penalty you're taking. It's like
Yeah.
you die, you go back just a little bit. Yeah. Apparently some people think you go back way too far, but
Oh yeah, some levels were ridiculously long. And,
they
like,
were. But I thought people wanted that.
uh,
I guess not.
it depends on the type of game, honestly.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like
I think we would have done better with shorter but more
Yeah.
levels.
it's like imagine if like Streets of Rage 2 had a stage that was like 4 hours long, and it's like, oh, okay, I can't play this anymore.
I mean, the highest part time was level 6, which was I think like 16 minutes or something like that.
Oh yeah.
Of course, like no one ever
6 is
really beat it, and but I mean that was supposed to be like the marathon level.
Oh, that was
But like 5 was short, 7 short.
yeah. Some of the levels were like pretty quick, but what does that remind me of? One of the maps in Doom were like just ridiculously long.
But
Like,
like
it was one of the
the
episode 3 levels. I don't know.
the reason like I think we would have done better with shorter levels is that for one, like people like to evaluate the game based on like quantity of levels, like rather than
Oh, yeah.
quantity. So it was like Oh, well, how many levels are there? 9.
Yeah.
Oh, that's not a lot. Yeah, but they're like 45 minutes. Some of them, like it's a lot of content. It's like there's a lot there, and they're in depth.
Yeah.
There's a lot of stuff to like. Well, but 9. It's like
No. It might have worked better if it was just split what we had into like 30 levels or something.
yeah. So then it's like, hey, 30 levels, huh? It's a
Because
lot.
yeah,
It's the same number as Doom, therefore it's just as good. So
yeah, it probably would feel like a lot more progression than if it was just some really gigantic, huge maps like.
yeah, and like the other reason I think that might have worked better is like like this is an arcade game. Like it's supposed
Yeah.
to be like when you run out of lives, you go back to the beginning of the level, and like if you're playing like a 20-minute level,
Yeah,
and
that's
you
a
you
pretty
lose
huge
all your
loss.
lives at the very end.
Yeah,
You're going back to the beginning. Like
that's a more significant loss. Yeah.
yeah. Whereas if you're just going back to the beginning of a short level, like it's not such a big deal.
Oh yeah.
So, but yeah,
Plus,
hey, you live
I
and you
guess
learn.
it mixes it up a lot more too because kind of gives a little more variety to the game rather than have like one big level. Like, what if like all of Doom Episode 1 was just like a single level? It wouldn't be as wouldn't be as nice or something.
Yeah, I mean, I do think that was a mistake on my part to make the levels so big.
Yeah.
Especially like considering like it's an arcade game. It's supposed to be kind of like really high intense action, but like not necessarily for a long period of time.
Oh yeah. Yeah, because then you get burnt out like really
Right,
quick.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, people were already doing that like a fairly early into the game. See, I mean, like when you look at like the Steam achievements, like you gotta figure out like how far people are getting for the most
Yeah.
part, and it's like most people are beating level 1. There's a pretty significant drop off. In terms of like beating level 3. So like
Yeah.
and this is from like a lot of the YouTube videos I've watched and everything. I mean, a lot of people like get to level 3, they die at Makron, the boss there, who was I admit he was too hard. Like he should have been like later in the game or something. Because like he like okay like the level 5 boss Nash, he's like you pretty much just like face him straight up without having to like learn any kind of complicated thing he's doing,
Yeah.
and beat him fairly easily. So like he should have been like level 3, and then something like Mechron should have been for level 5. But anyway,
Yeah.
but it's like most people like either like they were probably getting to that boss and dying, and then like just being like, oh my god, I'm not playing this 20-minute level again. I give up. I'm
Yeah.
throwing in the towel.
Yeah.
Or it's like they just died somewhere throughout the course of the level, and we're just like, oh, it's too much, and they rage quit, and didn't come back to it and finish it. One other thing I wanted to talk about was, I do think it's very important to, as a game developer, as or as basically a software developer, just to kind of like test out the own kind of your own products, games, whatever. Like it's something like people call a dog fooding. So it's like basically like if you're like making dog food, like try tasting it to make sure it's not like complete garbage. And I know I played Wrack like an absolute ton to kind of get things to kind of make sure things were right. I don't get the impression that like other people on the team were playing it all that much. And I mean, I don't mean to like single you out on that, but it was like, did you think there were like problems with the game that were like preventing you from playing it more? Were you just like burnt out working on it? Like I mean, kind of like what was your experience with that?
I think it was just like the length of some of the later levels just was uh, it was kind of like it detracted from it because like I like a lot of time when I opened it up to test something out like a small change or something to a model, right? I ended
Right.
up like actually playing the game like just because I was drawn into it and it was like a lot of fun for like the
Oh,
first
good.
like
I don't think I ever knew
four.
that, but yeah, that's
Oh
good.
yeah, no, I've played the first like four maps, like 4 or 5 maps, like a ton, and then it's
Oh yeah,
like,
same
and,
here.
and then it's like I get to like map 6, and it's like I'm like 10 minutes in, I'm like, oh man, this level isn't over yet,
Yeah, it's
and it's
like
like part 1 of 3 done, and I'm like, all right, yeah, I should go back to work, to be honest.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, no, that's true. No, like I actually have like a similar experience. Like, do you remember like the old prototype levels I did, where it
Oh
was like with
yeah.
the UT textures?
Oh
I
yeah.
probably played that more than anything, and then it's like when I started playing like like those didn't work anymore, and like I was actually forced to play like the actual rack maps, which were like much longer. It
Yeah.
was like I couldn't play like any more than like the first three before it was like, oh, it's just too much, it's taking too long, it's just
Oh yeah.
I got things to do, so
Absolutely.
yeah.
That was something that probably wasn't the best idea.
Yeah, and in hindsight, yeah, I do think, yeah, I mean, maybe trying to stick to like the whole like disposal area part one, part two thing, like maybe like doing, yeah,
Yeah.
it's seriously, I mean, like we could have gotten a lot more mileage, I think, out of like the assets we had, if those were, if that was split into like four levels instead of two,
Oh yeah.
three or four,
Hmm.
but I mean, it was like we could have, expanded the texture sets probably a little more to kind of have a little bit more diversity throughout four levels, but
Yeah.
I don't know, yeah, I think you're right, like in terms of like pacing, like it got to be too much at times,
Oh yeah. Um.
just like
But
not
yeah.
compartmentalized enough. And that's actually funny because like that's one thing where like I really give a lot of credit to platformers. It's like you go into the ice level, you go into the fire level, and it's like
Yeah.
it's very nice because it's like very short and like compartmentalized. Like this
Yeah.
small distinct section of this game is like for this, or it's like we kind of did that with Wrack, but like it wasn't like compartmentalized enough. It was like stuff stretched on for too long,
Oh yeah.
and
It's it wasn't like I guess distinct enough like between levels or whatever.
yeah.
Yeah.
And I mean, I think part of that was like the whole like, oh, it's a Doom, kind of like right off the bat, and people, kind of like getting set and that kind
Yeah.
of way of looking at the game. But yeah, and then also, I mean, yeah, I mean the levels themselves weren't distinct enough. I feel like if each level, like the introduction was like really super hard into like, hey, this is a new place now. This is new stuff coming at you. Instead of kind of like a different colored room.
Yeah.
I think that
Yeah.
probably would have helped a lot. It's like maybe if you started at level two, like surrounded by like nukage or something, and had to like jump away. I don't know, something like that.
So like level 3, I guess.
Yeah,
Mm.
kind of. But yeah. So I mean, do you have any kind of
Yeah.
final thoughts on Wrack? Anything we got particularly right or wrong with the design?
Well, I mean, it's nice that we could see, we recognize a lot of the stuff we could have done better because that's how you learn, making
Yeah,
mistakes. Yeah.
yeah.
But I feel like we've also done a lot right with it, and it ended up as a pretty solid product. Yeah.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
I mean, I think when the game first came out, I was definitely just because like I tend to not be reasonable in my expectations. It's like when it first came out, I was like, it's not Minecraft, no, But I mean, actually, kind of like in hindsight, I mean, the game has been well received. I mean, a lot of people have been out there enjoying it. We still have a community that's making good stuff, and I'm really excited to see that. And it's actually done really well.
I'm surprised actually, like how it ended up, like because I remember at first, like joining back in like 2009 or whatever. I was looking at everything we had, and I was like, how is this going to be a game? This is like,
Right.
But I
Right.
mean, I'm glad it developed into something like totally functional and
Yeah, and it's funny.
Right.
I mean, not to pick on any games specifically, but there's been some games that have released on Steam that are kind of like in that state that we were in originally in
yeah,
2009.
yeah, that's
And
what I was expecting, and I'm
right.
so happy that we ended up a lot better than that.
Yeah,
I'm really
and
proud.
I based on I mean again not to pick on anything, but just kind of like seeing how like those have kind of panned out. It's kind of like, hey, our hard work paid off. It's
Yeah,
yeah, maybe not, maybe every single little thing we did wasn't completely efficient, but
yeah. I
I
mean,
mean maybe like redoing the weapons wasn't like a good use of time and and money. But I mean, hey, I think in the long run, it's all gonna. If it hasn't paid off already, I mean, it's going to in the long run. And a lot that we did to improve the game, most certainly did pay off.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, very happy with the art style and just a lot of the texturing and the animations and a lot of the monster designs and boss designs. Like just very happy with all that.
Yeah. I'm happy with how it ended up as, I
Me too.
guess,
Me too.
despite, not to be egotistical as hell, because I'm usually super pessimistic about like everything I make, but uh, yeah, I felt like it came out like really well.
Yeah, me too. So yeah, and definitely looking forward to this next thing too. It's I mean, we're trying to take all the lessons that we've learned from this. I mean, a lot of the a lot of the mistakes we've discussed. That we made in Wrack, and really trying to shore them up and make sure that next time around our effort is even better and what we put out there is even better.
Oh yeah, it's trying new ideas. I'm
Yep.
I'm kind of glad it's not when you mentioned, I think in the near the beginning of Rack development, like, oh, this is going to be just like 3 games and it's going to be all the same. And I was like, what?
I don't think I said the same, but
Well, yeah, probably not the same. It's like, oh, it's going to be like this whole grand trilogy of, I don't know.
well, hey, you don't have to
Yeah, I
worry
don't know.
about that now. So
No, it's nice that going on to like new ideas, stuff like that. It offers a lot more variety and far more interesting. Too many sequels these days.
one thing I do want to mention real quick that we haven't really touched on very much is what about the whole like story stuff? Because like that's something like
Oh
we really
yeah,
tried to push and like I don't know, it didn't seem to work
it.
out
I
at
guess
all.
because it just felt like it was another one of those extraneous elements that kind of seemed like added in, but wasn't like designed with it in mind, like
Right.
through the levels and stuff at first.
Right.
So it was kind of like how Painkiller did the story. It's like it's there, but you could completely ignore it, and you would not know if there was one or not in the first
Right.
place. Yeah,
Pretty
it's just
much.
it's almost extraneous. Yeah.
Yeah, I think if I could go do it over again, I don't think I would have done it without any kind of voice acting. Yeah, I actually heard someone like mention on a podcast this past week, and I guess they were talking about I guess it was Bastion. I think they might have been mentioning, but they were basically like, yeah, like without the voice acting, it would have been a fine indie game, whatever. But it's like once you add like the voice acting on top of that, it's like, oh my god, it just like completely changes everything.
It's
It's
surprising.
like
Like,
having like a great voiceover instead of like just text. Like it's amazing how like big of an impact that can make.
yeah, it's surprising how like some details can massively enhance your experience with something, which is weird. Like a game could have like really killer menu music. It really bolsters your opinion of it.
Yeah, I mean, I agree completely. It's like the other example they gave was like the music in Star Wars. It's like if it wasn't John Williams music, if instead it was like some like '80s soundtrack or I guess '70s soundtrack, it's like
Oh yeah.
the movie would have been like garbage like without that.
A more extreme
Um,
example of that would be like Mortal Kombat. Imagine if it didn't have that intro music. It's just
yeah, yeah,
that would
it'd
be.
be nothing. Yeah,
It's
yeah.
like that music is just so good that I guess just you're just riding on like how awesome that was through the entire movie.
Yeah, but I feel like with Wrack, it's like unless like we had like good voice actors like actually reading the dialogue, yeah, I don't think there was like any way it was gonna work because it's like you
Um,
especially see it on like the YouTube videos. It's like people try and like read the like the Let's Players like they try and like read like the dialogue of the the narration. And it's just like you can tell it's like they don't understand. It's like okay, like everything was written with like a very specific voice in mind and like like very like in the case of EXO, like very specific accents. It's like when what's like read and said, like without that, like it's just, it just
Yeah.
falls apart completely. And it's like the people reading stuff on YouTube. It's like they were trying to like read everything in like a silly voice and just like completely. I mean, not that this game is like acting like it's like The Godfather or anything, but it's
Yeah.
like like I mean, the amount of respect that was being shown to like the characters and the dialogue was like zero. It's like they were like like everyone like reading it like they were like like the Monty Python guys like doing like women. You're like hello, just like it's like it's just not going to work at all if like that's the approach that's taken.
It's free license to be goofy, I guess.
Right, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And it's like by having like voice acting over that, it's like first of all, it's like you're gonna ensure that like the dialogue that's spoken is like the proper inflections used, the proper accents, all that is done. And then it's also like taking away like the ability for people to just like dump on it completely with like silly voices. So
I guess it could play a part, but it wouldn't like entirely like just solidify the position of story, I guess, within the game, and not make it like totally extraneous. Because if you look at like some other games like Bulk Slash, they have like voice acting and everything, and you don't need to care about the story at all because it just feels kind of removed from the core game.
Right. But yeah, I mean, just to really kind of drive the point home that I'm trying to make, it's like if Borderlands 2, I mean, if anytime Claptrap or Handsome Jack talk, just kind of like there was a dialogue box with the text there, and like there was no voice, like would that have worked at all? Like I don't think so.
No, probably not. But it also had like certain points like where the actual like elements like I don't know, find crumpets or something. It added to the actual story, like being tied to the gameplay and stuff like that, rather than try to act like the story wasn't just run through this level and shoot everything and then find the exit switch and hit it or something.
Right. But there were times where we were trying to kind of tie story elements to the game. It's kind of like the whole like side rescue mission on level 6 where you gotta go after Starlin. And then like at the end where it's like, oh, Kane's sword is actually Captain America's shield and made out of a special metal, and like that kind of thing. But I mean,
I guess it was infrequent.
It was, and it was infrequent and not established early enough. Again, kind of going back to what we talked to. It's if you don't establish these things early enough, it's people aren't going to perceive it. Yeah. So. Alright, so that was my conversation with Hani Makron. Hope you guys enjoyed that. I know I certainly did. It's always fun to have an honest conversation, and hopefully hearing our thought process behind some of our design choices will give you some insights. And hopefully our conversations helped you learn a thing or two. Hell, after this conversation, now I know our levels were too long, so hey, you live and you learn. Well, that's going to do it for this week's episode. Thank you for listening, and if you have any suggestions for guests or topics, please do hit me up on Twitter at FBECarnival. And also feel free to leave a comment on the YouTube version of this podcast. Until next time, take it easy, guys. Bye.